You've got two questions if I make a statement like that, probably, right? Well, the first one is, who am I to talk about that? The second one is, what in blazes, how on earth, no pun intended, does NASA know about your health? Let's start with the first. Who am I? I was a senior scientist and flight projects manager for a human research program aboard the International Space Station and the Space Shuttle from 2000 to 2010. I had my finger on the pulse of at least 46 human life science experiments. So does that make me an expert? Absolutely not. The reason is this stuff changes all the time. This data changes constantly. The International Space Station has only been whole, when I say whole, I mean suitable for 6 people, for about a year and a half or 2 years. And to do these experiments, the astronauts have to volunteer. And until you have a full crew, you have a very limited number of people doing the experiments that you can get results. On top of that, these experiments take a long time to generate any answers. So you get indications of answers, but the final answers won't be coming for a while. So in other words, the data changes. Check your sources if you're going to, anything you hear on today's talk, make sure you are very careful about paying 100% attention to it, because it might be wrong the next day. And drill me in the hall, and drill me at the Q&A session. We'll have a Q&A session at the end. Don't be afraid to we probably won't have time here because there's just way too much information, and there's always somebody else coming on. So I don't really have much time to breathe here. I'm on a treadmill getting all this information out, but we will have a dedicated Q&A session. So with that, one more thing about science, about experts, and about medical advice. Keep this in mind throughout. Past behavior is not a guarantee of future performance. The stock market, past behavior is a guarantee of future performance until it isn't. That's science. Science is based on the scientific method, observation, hypothesis, testing, more testing, proof of repeatability. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. You have to rule out any other possibility when it comes to making a claim. And with all that, it's still not infallible. Once we believe the Earth was flat, we believed before the first landing on the moon, some people did, scientists, that it was covered with meters of moon dust, and the lunar module would sink and be completely engulfed by moon dust. You could go on and on and on with cold fusion and with quantum mechanics turning Einstein's classical theory upside down. You can go on and on and on with this stuff. Even to the point of if you went 200 years ago and a person in the street and asked him, "Can you see inside the human body?" He'd say, "Are you crazy? Are you nuts?" But the tools change. Our ability changes. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll even have X-ray eyes and we'll be able to, actually look. So, regarding medical advice, ye seek certainty when there is no certainty. The only expert in town is you. Do your homework, get multiple opinions, and never fall for a smooth, slick line, even my own. Don't do it. It's dangerous. Let's start out keeping that in mind. The second question, how on earth can NASA know anything about my health? This is a little harder to answer. To answer it, we need to know a little bit about space versus Earth. Space is a bad place to be without a spacesuit. Cosmic radiation in lethal doses. You'll boil if you face the sun. You will freeze if you face the shade. There's no oxygen to breathe. There's no gravity. There's no pressure. Dead in 60 seconds. A guy took the trouble to actually show what would happen. Sort of. If you went out into space without a spacesuit, it's kind of funny. He uses Marshmallow Man. There he's putting Marshmallow Man in a vacuum, like space, pumping the air out. Contrary to a lot of opinions, you don't explode, you don't splat all over the place. This is kind of what happens to you. You kind of swell. Tissues start breaking down on the inside, and then you sort of just kind of collapse. There you go. Some people have no life. I mean, they've got to figure out this thing with a marshmallow, right? But I thought it was cute. Okay, to get around this deadly situation, in space, we do the following. We provide a spacesuit or a spacecraft that provides oxygen, temperature control, pressure, waste management, carbon dioxide removal, food, drinking water, power, all of those things. It does not provide much in the way of radiation protection. A lot of reasons. Real radiation protection requires a lot of thick mass. Spacecraft don't have that much of a luxury to put meters thick walls. And some of it won't even help. And spacecraft generally do not provide gravity unless it's artificial gravity, and there are very few spacecraft ever been designed to do that. They're in the drawing boards, they're complicated. That's a whole other story. But given what we know, and given that people have been up in space in this environment for over 50 years, is there anything we can learn from that environment that has lessons for you guys in the audience? First up, radiation exposure. Like the colors of a rainbow, radiation's everywhere. It's visible, it's invisible, and it comes in all different kinds of flavors. Galactic cosmic rays floating around from deep space in the cosmos, heavy metallic particles, solar particle events or sunspot events that take place, solar storms. Those are high-energy lighter particles. EMFs, electromagnetic radiation on Earth, from radios to radar to microwaves to cell phones. You can characterize all of these by three things: their wavelength, their frequency, intensity. Don't be scared. Let's take a look at what it looks like. Here you go. Everything in the electromagnetic spectrum falls into this. Here's wavelengths. That means it's very long waves, kind of like you've seen them in the ocean, big, long, gradual waves, right? That's low wavelength radiation. That is short wavelength radiation. Okay, the longer wavelength radiation tends to be lower frequency, and the shorter wavelength radiation tends to be higher frequency, meaning that these waves are going do-do-do-do-do-do-do. They're also associated with a temperature. So these down here are lower temperature, and these up here are higher temperature. And you see how the band goes. Our senses are targeted right over here in the visible range. That's what it is. And those waves are about the size of a protozoa. On the other hand, radio waves are about the size of a building. Microwaves, the size of them, each wave is about the size of a person. And as you go on, you see needlepoint. Infrared is needlepoint, a needle. You come down here, ultraviolet is the size of a molecule. X-ray is the size of an atom. And there you go. So this is pretty much the environment that we're surrounded by all the time. We don't have to deal with much except over here, fortunately. Of course, we've got lots of equipment that generates these things. We have to worry about protecting ourselves from those. So you've likely got some questions now that you've seen all of that. And the questions would be, how much danger am I in from a chest X-ray, a dental X-ray, MRIs, microwaves, power lines, nuclear power plants, cell phones, computer screens, TV, iPad, cell phones, radon gas, other? You've probably got lots of questions about those. Maybe at one time you don't have them now, but at one time I'm sure you have. And so to get answers, I thought I'd give you the three kinds of answers you get to this. The first one is the long-winded one. You ask an expert, and you'll get, here's a question. 5 years ago, I had a barium test done. 3 years ago, I had a mouthful of X-rays done. Recently, I had 8 bite wings, one peripheral panoramic, another full possibility I'll need that don't require. I am concerned I will get cancer someday from this excessive radiation. So he asks an expert, and here's the expert's response. Blah, blah, blah. I understand your concern. Your comments lead me to think you're probably at dental school. Most dental schools use post-stimulate phosphor plates, known as indirect digital. He goes on and talks about the background radiation. He talks about mathematical risk models. The most conservative is a model used of linear no throw hedge. Dose response model. Have we lost you yet? Keep on going. Okay, the current model suggests that the radiation dose may accumulate over time. You have to go through this whole thing before you finally get to the end based on available data. Additional risk in the radiation you have is minimal compared to the barium swallow. There may be greater risk associated from not receiving necessary dental treatment that you require rather than a few additional dental films. That's his answer. Now let's go to the other extreme. The oh my God answer. Here is the oh my God answer. I pulled this one out of an in-flight magazine on the way over here from to Papeete from San Francisco. And EMFs in your health. You want to know what this one says? This one says, Came from an in-flight magazine written by a purported expert. Keep that expert advice that I told you about, experts, second-guessing experts. It cannot be traced to any professional-based peer-reviewed study and advises you to unplug every device in your home when not in use. Stay away from TV, computer, cell screens. Shut off your cell phone when not in use. Use earbuds. Instead of listening to it, never place a cell phone near your body or your head. Avoid Wi-Fi. Use Ethernet cable. Use a wired baby monitor. Use a hand-wired line at home. Use a stove or oven instead of a microwave. Word to the wise, be wary of this stuff. Don't believe it because it's in a magazine and somebody wrote it. So what's somebody to do? Well, what I do is this. Space is the most unforgiving and severe radiation environment there is. NASA has established career allowable doses for astronauts in space. Here is how your exposure would compare to theirs. Down over here we have risk of cancer death, percent risk of cancer death. Over here we have a mission on ISS. Astronauts are up there 6 months to a year. Here is their risk of getting cancer in a full mission of that duration. It goes from 0.1% to a little bit over 1% if they were to stay a year. 0.1 to a little bit over 1% risk of getting cancer. By the way, that is not a career allowable dose. A career allowable dose is up here in a Mars mission. When you get to the vicinity of 10%, that means that that's the only time you're going, that's the only mission you're going into space, and once you do that, you are not going into space anymore. So that's a career allowable dose. Where does your X-rays and dental work and MRIs fall? Just X-ray. That's 0.001% to 0.01%. CT, 0.01% to 0.009%. What does that mean? It means you would have to do 10 chest X-rays to get to a diagnostic CT. You would have to do 10 diagnostic CTs to get to the first level of an ISS mission, which is 1/10 of 1%. You get the math and where it's going. You would have to have a lifetime of this stuff to even get in this range. So bottom line, you're not in much danger. Okay, so that's radiation. Next up, absence of gravity. That's what the main characteristic is in space once you protect the person. The absence of gravity is termed microgravity, and it can help us understand our own health on Earth. How can it do it? One reason is absence of gravity is used to simulate and train astronauts, and there's only two ways we do it. One is at a big underwater pool, and the other is on a bed. Bed rest studies. When you put a person in a bed, they're horizontal instead of vertical. The gravitational forces from head to foot are not like that. They're little tiny ones. And in a way, it's like being in space. So, if bed rest is similar to no gravity in space, that means what happens in space would likely happen to you if you stayed in a bed long enough, or in a couch too long, or in a horizontal or inactive position too long, or in a hospital bed too long. These are all things to be aware of when you decide to just be a couch potato or not do anything. What does happen? Well, if you look at the human body systems, the different physiological systems, starting at time 0, when everything is normal, and you plop somebody on a bed or in outer space, all of these changes happen to your body's systems. This one here is a vestibular system. This is fluid electrolyte system, cardiovascular system, hematological, fluid electrolytes, lean body metabolism, etc., etc. Now, you'll notice in almost every case, they return back to normal in some period of time. Vestibular returns back to normal within a week. Some of the other ones take months to go back to normal. Some of the other ones don't even go back to normal if you stay in space long enough. We haven't figured out a way to get them back to normal. So, what we do know, without gravity, astronauts will lose up to 2% bone density a month. Some lose more, some lose less. A mission to Mars of 1 year or more could cause up to 1/4 of bone loss, resulting in severe injury possibly fatality if not corrected and countered. Space flight, as far as bone loss concerns, mimics osteoporosis and fast forward. Instead of waiting a lifetime to see somebody suffer from the effects of osteoporosis, you can see it happen in months. And of course, you can try to correct it and see if your corrective action works within months. Same thing with immune system compromise. So we know when you put somebody in this environment, countermeasures must be developed. So the question you're probably asking is, can such countermeasures help you? Well, first question is, how do you develop them? Where do they come from? They come from research aboard the International Space Station. That research is done in the following disciplines: bone, muscle, you read them, immunology, multi-system, smart tech, all of this stuff. Research is done in those areas. The International Space Station was designated as a national laboratory upon its completion, and they've got a little, little promo to show you.
What is CASIS? CASIS is the Center for the Advancement of Science in Space, and it manages the National Laboratory on the International Space Station. CASIS is launching a new era of space research to help reduce cost, increasing access and opportunity. CASIS is your gateway to innovation, breakthroughs, commercial R&D research, giving scientific, commercial, and educational industries equal access to space for the betterment of humankind. CASIS is appointed by Congress to identify the opportunities for the International Space Station, to take advantage of its unique environments to generate a return on investments, not only financially, but to improve life on Earth as well for the citizens of the United States. We do this by breaking down barriers, assisting in research, connecting, hardware, and funding. CASIS, bringing home the magic of space.
Okay, so some of these areas, you can see some of the experiments that are being done in the area of bone. You see subregional assessment of bone loss in the axial skeleton. If you look at the research investigators, they're not just the U.S., and the benefits are not just for the U.S. The space station is international, so that was kind of a misnomer in that promo. But you see, here's one on Japan, from Japan. Muscle, you see Penn State, Marquette, but you see Sweden. And if you keep on going through all these different ones, Denmark, University of California, Houston, Texas, you'll see a variety of these experiments are internationally based. You need to have some credentials at a university, or you have to submit a very rigorous plan for research because it's highly competitive. And when you do these things, hopefully you can learn something. But you got to be aware it's going to take time. Space station's a difficult platform. How much time? On the order of 5-7 years to complete an experiment. They don't cost as much as you might think. Average cost, let me get it back here, $1.5 million for a typical experiment. So they're all going up there now. All these experiments are proceeding now. They're in work as we speak. As it floats overhead, the astronauts are doing these experiments. Let's get back to our changes, because this is where the fun begins. And look at some of the extremes from the fastest change to the slowest. The fastest change in the body takes place in the vestibular system. Here you see what happens. Entering space, day 0. By 1 day, your maximum change happens. By 1 week, it's back. It's caused by conflicting signals in our neurovestibular system, our inner ear and our eye, and our environment. Does that sound familiar? Sound familiar to you guys? What happens the first day you're on a cruise ship? What happens when we go from smooth sailing to rockety-wockety-wockety? Well, it's the same exact thing. In space, it's called space motion sickness. Here, it's called seasickness. And the solutions, the countermeasures developed are virtually the same. Let's see. Symptoms: dizziness, balance, seasickness. Countermeasures: time. Oddly enough, if you do this enough times, you get used to it. Veterans don't get space motion sickness like rookies do. People who sail on ships multiple times don't get as seasick as they did the first time. But if that doesn't work for you, you can get a patch, you can get a band, you can get medication, and hopefully, if you do get a patch, if you get a band, by the way, a pressure band, you can get them usually at the front desk. You can get them at almost any drugstore. They're not going to do you any good if you've already got the symptoms. So if you know we're coming into a situation, get them there, put them on first. Okay, intermediate changes, cardiovascular changes, and muscle changes. These take place slower, as you can see here. It takes up to 1 month to peak, and then they come down, presuming that you do the work to make them go down, the countermeasures. What are those? The symptoms are atrophy, muscle strength loss, cardiac issues, pacemaker issues. All of these things happen in that environment. The countermeasures: get off the couch, get off the bed, exercise, and there are proper medications. That's what you have to do to counter that. And I can't emphasize that strongly enough. Slowest change: calcium, bone loss. 6 months or more, you see what happens here, how long it takes to go up. And sometimes it comes down, sometimes it levels off, and sometimes it keeps going. We're not quite sure why it does what, and why some people do and some people don't. It might have to do with diet. It might have to do with total number of calories and fluid loss. All these things are not in and of themselves. The body is a box of multiple independent systems. It's not a single black box for each system that is independent of everything else. Everything is affected by everything else. That's what makes this research so hard, because the guys who are looking in the neurovestibular world, they don't talk to the guys in the cardiovascular world. The guys in the bone loss world don't talk to the guys in the hematological world, and so they act as if they're the only game in town, that's the only box. That's what makes it so hard, because it's not. It's multiple variables going on at the same time. But we do know that you, again, need to get off the couch. You have to have impact on bone, and you have to exercise, and there are certain medications. We've derived a whole slew of these medications, class of them called alendronates, which are used for to counter bone loss, and a lot of exercise. Here's the slowest one of all, and maybe the most insidious, because we haven't figured out how to get this one down at all, and this one is the immunological system compromise. Manifestations on Earth: autoimmune diseases, aging, countermeasures. Well, there happen to be 2 experiments on the International Space Station studying this right now. Instructive to look at them. First, T-cell activation and aging. T-cells are a type of white cell coated with chemical receptors that must work to activate the immune system. They generate an immune response used to fight foreign antigens. This experiment seeks to find a defect in activation while in space. And as people age, immune system deteriorates and reduces the ability to fight that. So the same types of change occurring in healthy crew members of International Space Station occur on Earth much more slowly. And countermeasures developed may lead to treating things like arthritis, diabetes, immune system diseases. Slowing the aging process, believe it or not, is also a possibility. Here's another one. Reactivation and shedding of latent herpes virus. As an astronaut's flight approaches in the 2 weeks before he gets or she gets to launch, something very interesting happens. It's called reactivation of latent herpes virus. 90% of the population is thought to carry the Epstein-Barr virus. It's a DNA viral agent that's thought to be a precursor of many infectious diseases, including herpes viruses. Astronauts experience this activation and buildup. Funny enough, a day or two before the actual launch, it seems to take a dive. And then when they're up in space, it goes up again. So we've been studying this a while. It might be manifested as asymptomatic viral shedding, no symptoms, localized clinical infection, herpetic lip lesion, a generalized local infection, or more severe infection. Studying it on ISS may lead to more effective courses of treatment, and that's being studied extensively. So, if we had to put our fingers on what we've absolutely learned so far, countermeasure number 1 is exercise. Astronauts exercise 2 hours a day on the International Space Station using a combination of a treadmill, a bike ergometer, and advanced resistive exercise device, or bands, kind of a space equivalent of a weight machine. They look very similar to the kind of things you see in most gyms, but there are
is teaching us how to explore. Before we can go to the moon or to Mars, we have to learn a lot about the human body. What happens when you put yourself inside a spaceship for weeks and even months? What food are we going to eat? Are we going to bring it all in cans, or are we going to grow some food on board?
So you've seen all of these things, and those are the three types of devices. If somebody tells you you're going to have to exercise and you're not used to it, you start to scratch your head and say, well, how much and how intense and all that stuff. Remember, you were once fit or athletic or both, and you can be again. Remember this, too. Astronauts live in a microgravity environment 24 hours a day and need 2 hours of exercise to counter it. If you spend 8 hours a day on your back alone, just sleeping, that's 1/3 of what they experience. So it makes sense. You should do 1/3 what they do. Well, 1/3 what they do is 40 minutes a day. And the more you, now maybe you're an insomniac, you don't sleep that much, but on the other hand, maybe you counter that by sitting in a bed a lot, or watching watching a TV a lot. So whatever it is, you really need to target 30, 40 minutes a day. As to the type of exercise, keep in mind, astronaut exercise programs are individually prescribed. Don't take matters into your own hands without doing the research. I have to emphasize that again and again. Consult at least 2 sports medicine physicians before beginning and check their credentials. This is your job. It's not somebody else's job. There's no certainty out there. There's no magic bullet out there. There's nobody who's going to tell you what to do. You are responsible for you, and I will say that another 5 times during this talk. Don't even believe me. Don't believe a single word I'm saying. I'm just telling you what we know, the state of the art as we know it. But you do know this. Don't sit at a desk or lie down all day. The more time you spend sitting horizontal, the faster you will be permanently horizontal. There might be some help on the way. Help in the way of machines that are built into your desk or in your bed. Machines where you can actually push on a little hand ergometer or squeeze your feet on a pedal like an old Singer sewing machine attached to your bed, so you don't just sit at your desk going, like that. So you could also put those in bed. So people are working on devices that could be incorporated into a desk or a bed. The latest rage is the stand-up desk. How many have heard of the stand-up desk? Quite a few of you. So there's a building body of knowledge that says, get off, stand up, you know. Another device, the vibration platform. We'll talk about that in a minute. Another device, and believe it or not, I mean, I used to laugh at this. You've probably all seen it. But sometimes there is a little knowledge out there that says it might not be as completely crazy as it sounds, and that is the $14,400 4-minute workout. What does that look like? There's this machine. It looks like something right out of H.G. Wells's Time Machine, right? Okay, they claim that high-intensity, short-duration workouts are much, much better for you than long-duration, low-intensity workouts. And believe it or not, some of the research coming down from the space station supports that. It doesn't say it's got to be 4 minutes, but it says it's got to be short and intense. As to how short and how intense, the jury's still out. But it just goes to show you. Some other things we're learning, very interesting, is do you really need to lift a lot of weight? Do you really need a high-intensity machine to work against? A growing body of knowledge says no. Again, it's not a slam dunk, but think of it this way. When you stand, what does that consist of? It consists of you moving like this and this, doesn't it? You're actually lifting up one leg and the other leg, and you don't even notice it because maybe you did when you were a baby, but all of us are basically balancing the whole time. That act of balancing sends thousands of nerve impulses to your muscles. Thousands. High-frequency nerve impulses, because they've got to sense you moving this way and move you back. Sense you moving this way and move you back, right? So this body of knowledge seems to indicate that the older you get and the more you get off your feet, you start depriving that signal, that whole myriad of signals which goes to the bone that might make that bone grow, you take it away. The more time you spend sitting and sleeping and in a bed and in front of a TV, the less those signals happen. And that might be a bigger key than 1 hour a day going to a machine and doing this kind of stuff. So this guy, Clint Rubin, he's the father of all this business. He's out at the University of New York, State University of New York in Stony Brook.
I'm Clinton Rubin. I'm professor and chair of the Department of Biomedical Engineering here at Stony Brook University. My specialty is I would call it low intensity vibration, so I guess the acronym would be LIV. It has the sensation of buzzing. So it's not big, intense activity, which is certainly I'm not here to suggest that people shouldn't do strenuous exercise. But when you think of the population groups that we're interested in, which are the frail or the sedentary or the infirm, I'm very excited because all the clinical trials that we've done on postmenopausal women or children with disabling conditions or young women with osteoporosis have shown that the signal is not only safe, but it's efficacious.
Okay, some of us are scared to start these things. Maybe we have an injury. Maybe we don't know how to begin this or an illness. If you have any of these things, like I have one right now, I got an intense shock of, I don't know if it's sciatica or herniated disc about a month before this voyage, and I almost didn't come because it froze me and I couldn't even walk for 3 days. So little by little I'm getting over it. I don't even know, I didn't take an MRI, so I don't know the source. I only know I'm getting over it, and I know the course of treatment, which I followed, most of which is either physical therapy or, you know, some steroids and stuff like that. And if it doesn't get any better, then you got to go to the next step. But that aside, you probably go through these stages of shock and then depression. And I've been fit all my life, and I found myself sitting around the house looking out a window and depressed because what am I going to do if this happens and I can't walk? And then you accept it, and then you start doing the research, and then you plan, once you do the research, what are you going to do about it, including who you're going to see, and if you trust them, finally action, and then last and most important, commitment. You've got to keep it up. Keep it up. It doesn't matter how much it hurts, what the deal is, you got to keep it up. And this one, if you end up in a hospital, all I can say is get out of there as fast as you can, and not for some of the reasons that you've heard about all the bugs floating around in a hospital. Look at it this way. You'll be in a bed 24 hours a day. That's like being on ISS 24 hours a day. But astronauts are super fit and exercising 2 hours a day. You go in unfit, physically compromised, and exercise 0 hours. Is it any wonder that some people don't come out of there after they go in? Are the hospitals doing anything for this? The answer is no. That bed is the same bed it's been for 100 years. Maybe they take you for a little quick walk down the aisle and back. It's a place you don't want to be unless you bring your own countermeasures with you. Okay, here we hit the big one, my favorite one. So, nutrition, diet, weight loss, weight gain. There's a lot of hocus pocus out there. Beware of false claims. Don't believe anything I say either, because, I've done my own research, but that's my research, it's not yours. Do your homework. Come to your own conclusion. I'm sorry to say there is no single expert out there. Here's a little film to set the stage.
The idea of using nutrition to promote good health is nothing new. Indeed, Hippocrates, the ancient Greek father of Western medicine, said, "Let food be thy medicine," over 2,000 years ago. Yet it wasn't until more recently that the science behind this observation was systematically probed and applied.
The average American now carries 23 extra pounds.
Heart disease and stroke will claim the lives of 460,000 American women.
69 grams of fat. You could actually save 12 grams of the fat and half the calories if you simply ate an entire stick of butter.
We're talking about diabetes and hypertension and bone diseases, osteoporosis.
Prostate cancer is now the most common cancer in American men.
Doctors say we really need to eat less red and processed meat.
On arteriosclerosis and cancer and autoimmune disease.
We have unprecedented amount of type 2 diabetes in our children, and we're starting to see hypertension in our children in grammar school.
In case you're wondering, 2,120 calories.
Clearly, the Western diet is taking a toll. This should serve as a wake-up call. We have a growing problem, and the ones who are growing are us.
Food. It's central to our lives and traditions. Every special occasion seems to involve food and feasting. But could some of these same foods, including several that we think are good for our health, also be causing many of our most serious health problems? Indeed, we're facing a massive health crisis. No less than 40% of Americans today are obese, and about half of us are taking some form of prescription drug.
The best-known statin drug, Lipitor, is the most prescribed drug ever in the world.
Almost 1 in 5 American 4-year-olds are now considered to be obese.
Though Mexican-American and African-American children are still more likely to be overweight.
This could be the first generation of children in the United States that lives less than its parents.
The American diet has changed dramatically. Near the beginning of the 20th century, Americans each ate about 120 pounds of meat annually. By 2007, that figure had exploded to no less than 222 pounds. In 1913, we ate about 40 pounds of processed sugar each per year. However, by 1999, our consumption of all refined sweeteners had risen to over 147 pounds. In 1909, Americans consumed around 294 pounds of dairy products apiece. But by 2006, our yearly intake of dairy had more than doubled to 605 pounds. We spend $2.2 trillion a year on health care, over 5 times more than the defense budget. In fact, we pay more per person for health care than any industrialized country in the world. Yet we're sicker than ever.
You see, there's no money in healthy people, and there's no money in dead people. The money is in the middle. People who are alive, sort of, but with one or more chronic conditions.
Obesity, diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure are all diet-related health issues that cost this country more than $120 billion each year.
Every minute, a person in the U.S. is killed by heart disease. 1,500 people a day die from cancer. Combined, these two diseases kill over 1 million Americans every year. Cases of diabetes are skyrocketing, particularly among our younger population.
Diabetes.
Life-threatening diabetes.
1 out of 3 people born in the U.S. today will develop this crippling condition during their lifetime. Millions of others suffer from a host of degenerative diseases. Millions more of us are so stimulated by sugar, coffee, and energy drinks that we've masked our chronic fatigue. But could there be a single solution to all of these problems? A solution so comprehensive, yet so straightforward, that it's mind-boggling that more of us haven't taken it seriously?
Someone has to stand up and say that the answer isn't another pill. The answer is spinach.
A growing number of researchers claim that if we eliminate or greatly reduce refined, processed, and animal-based foods, we can prevent, and in certain cases even reverse, several of our worst diseases. They say all we need to do is adopt a whole foods, plant-based diet. It sounds almost too simple to be true.
Okay, well, there's another possibility, since we know so much about, we do so much research in space. What does the space research world have to say about nutrition? If it's good for them, should it be good for you? Here you're looking at some of the astronaut food. I think I showed the other day. on ISS. Sonny showed you typical meals. These meals are broken down on the space station the following categories: beverages, freeze-dried drinks, mixes, coffee, tea, flavored drinks; fresh foods, fresh fruit, vegetables, tortillas delivered by resupply missions. They spoil quickly, have to be eaten within the first 2 days of flight. Irradiated food, beef steak is sterilized, ionizing radiation to keep it from spoiling. Intermediate moisture, they have some moisture but not enough to cause spoilage. Natural form, shelf-stable foods, nuts, cookies, granola bars, rehydratable. They've been dehydrated by various technologies. They need to be rehydrated. And thermostabilized, also known as a retort process. This process heats food to destroy pathogens, microorganisms, enzymes. Examples: extended shelf like bread products, scones, waffles, and rolls. Up to 18-month shelf life. As Sonny mentioned yesterday, there's a whole variety of ethnic foods on board the station. There's Chinese food, kung pao chicken, and all those kind of things. And there's, well, oh, you can't really see this. It's all come together. I guess that was one of the things that spun off. There's Korean food, Japanese food, Chinese food, Swedish food. There's a variety of different kinds of food. If you take a look at what this food is, the breakdown, here it is. It's laid out, all the different vitamins, all the different kinds of metals, copper, magnesium, zinc, the different relative nutrient density, the nutrition breakdown by protein, carbohydrates, fats, fluids, all that stuff. It's looked at in great detail. Summarizing it, NASA has marshaled many resources to arrive at desired for spaceflight. That said, most astronauts still lose weight on long-duration flights. That fluid shifts in low gravity and a tendency to drink and eat less than the prescribed amount might be the culprit. Time will tell. But there are some take-home lessons for all of us based on this particular diet. Take-home lesson number 1. The basics of food and nutrition. Now, I don't want to try to jump into anything controversial here, so I'm going to give you one thing that most people agree on. Continuity of mass and energy, food in minus activities out, lead to weight gained or weight lost. If you take in more than you exercise, you're going to gain weight, and vice versa. Food in, average daily requirement for sedentary middle-aged male. We'll use this as our standard bearer here. It varies, of course, but let's just use this as an average. 2,000 calorie diet. It varies with age, gender, height, weight, condition, climate. Typical range can be as low as 1,800 sedentary female and 2,700 to active 20-year-old athlete. These are some of the activities for that we do during a typical day. Let's take a typical day of an average person, not an exercise freak, but an average person. 8 hours sitting or working at a desk. That burns about 900 calories. 3 hours at mealtime. Breakfast, lunch, dinner added up, 300 calories. 1 hour exercise, an easy walk, 200 calories. 4 hours of miscellaneous activities, another 200, and 8 hours of sleep, 400 calories. Add all of these together, they come to 2,000 calories. You take in 2,000 calories, you run through a lifestyle like that, you burn 2,000 calories, you don't gain any weight, you don't lose any weight. You're in stability, you're in equilibrium. Equilibrium is shown by these two arrows. They're the same size in food-out activities. Let's investigate a little bit more here. Calorie counting. There are only 2 ways to lose body weight, even on a cruise ship. Decrease your food calories in or increase your activities out. And the reverse, if you want to gain weight, the reverse is true, of course. Here's a little thing to keep in mind. It takes 3,500 calories consumed to gain 1 pound of body weight. That's designed to make you feel better on this ship. That's a lot of calories, right? In fact, you would have to triple your food input each day to gain a pound. Triple what you eat. And think of what you're eating now. To gain a pound, you would have to triple it. On the other hand, if you wanted to exercise and get rid of that weight, it's just as crazy. To get rid of 3,500 calories, you would have to run a marathon. A 4-hour marathon to burn off 1 pound of body weight. So that's the marathon, that's the food, that's the tripling of calories, and that's the normal exercise rate. Avoid these extremes. Don't even think about going there. Instead, think of decreasing slightly and increasing slightly. For instance, a 10% drop in calories consumed or a 10% rise in activity level each day would result in 1 pound of body weight lost every 17.5 days. Doesn't sound like much until you get to the end of the year and you notice you've lost 20 pounds. That's why you gain weight in the first place. You do a little 5%, a little blip. Oh, I think I can get away with this. And then 5 or 10 years later, all of a sudden, you've got a big gut. It didn't happen overnight. And it's not going to go away overnight. And you got to treat it, knowing it's not going to go away overnight. So just a little 10% increase, less food in, or a 10% increase in calories out. That's how you have to handle it. How can I raise my calories out? Let's start off with that one. Well, here's your day, right? Here's your typical day. 8 hours sitting, 3 hours mealtime, 1 hour exercise, 4 hours miscellaneous, 8 hours sleep. Well, you can't do anything about increasing your activity while you sleep unless you're an insomniac, right? You can't do that. So you've got to target the other things. What are the other things? The biggest one is right here, sitting at a desk. So, or the 4 hours of miscellaneous activities. You can do that. If you decide you're going to target those areas, then the next question is, how are you going to increase your activities? Well, there's two ways. You can use the good old-fashioned way, which looks like a chart that you can get called an activity metabolic rate planner, and it tells you what the exercise output of every imaginable kind of thing, from walking and sweeping and house cleaning and rowing and all this stuff. You can look at them relative to each other and pick one, or you can go super modern technology and use what's out there today, a Fit, iWatch, or other tech device. These things are all available. They're not that expensive. You wear them, and they work by counting the number of steps and the number of arm motions. It's not perfect, but it gets you in the ballpark. And you can compare what it is when you wear this thing, when you change your activity, to what it was before. Okay, so that's pretty simple. How do you drop the food calories in? This is much more complicated because you can't take a picture. There's no little watch you can wear that measures the food that you take in and counts the calories. Nobody wants to go to a book and look, if this was this, I put this, I'm going to go to that, and look up this one, it's 15 calories and 20 calories, and you don't want to do that. It would be nice to have an app where you could take a picture with your iPhone of what you eat, and it went right into some crazy, wonderful technology and told you what the calories were, and I'm sure someday it'll be there, but it's not right now. So there are certain truths. Without that, there are certain truths you need to know. The first one is all food consists of proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. You need all three. Fats for the cell walls, back up energy. Protein for amino acids, organs, building muscle and skin, and carbs for energy in every cell. The proper mix is a quagmire of advice, opinion, and falsehoods. You got to do the research. More than one source. You got to. What we know for sure, however, something we know for sure, 1 gram of fat supplies 8 calories of energy. 1 gram of protein supplies 4 calories of energy. 1 gram of carbs supplies 4 calories of energy. Stated another way, in your 2,000 calorie diet, if you only ate protein, you'd have to have a pound of it. If you only ate carbs, you'd have to have a pound of it. If you only ate fat, you'd have to have half a pound of it to get your 2,000 calories. But nobody does that. So what is the proper mix? Astronauts have 55% from carbs, or 0.6 of a pound a day, 25% from fats, and 20% from protein. But that, of course, leads to the next question, doesn't it? What kind of carbs? What kind of fats? What kind of protein? Many different kinds. Breads, when talk the carbs, breads, sugars, pastas, all this stuff. Once digested, however, they all end up the same way as glucose. And those of you who remember your high school biology class maybe remembers this equation called the respiration equation. Glucose, the end product of everything you eat almost, is combined with oxygen. Breathe it in, combine with that food after the glucose in the blood, and you produce CO2. You breathe it out, you produce water. It refills the plasma, refills everything that you've lost from your body, all the fluid loss. And it produces energy and heat, which is why we're all walking around at 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. The energy supplies every single cell and muscle in your body. Just as an aside, if glucose is the end product, why are we so worried about it? And the answer is refined sugar in large doses can cause serious health problems and a big spike. But really, I wouldn't worry about 3 spoons of sugar in your coffee. I have 4 or 5 myself, but I don't have much in the way of anything else. I really wouldn't worry about it. There's hardly any calories in a teaspoon of sugar. So if you start going crazy with lots of desserts, that's a different story. Okay. What about fats? Many different kinds. Trans fats, fatty acids, triglycerides, cholesterol, saturated, unsaturated. Some are essential for cellular function, vitamin utilization, or others thought to be bad, causing diabetes, heart disease. The Mayo Clinic recommends 40 to 80 grams a day. That's 0.1 to 0.2 pounds, or 10% to 20% of your total calories for a 140-pound person, and 0 trans fat or saturated fats. The third one, protein. What about protein? Highly controversial.
In even the early 1900s, there were statements made that this is the stuff of civilization itself.
Protein was also nearly synonymous with animal-based foods like meat. It still is today, all over America.
Why do you think meat is important in our diet?
Protein.
Protein?
Protein.
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 A lot of protein.
We need protein, don't we? We can't live without protein.
The idea that plants had protein also didn't come into play until maybe the late 1800s, early 1900s, and then it struggled through the years.
No matter what source the protein came from, in the late 1950s, most scientists believed the world needed a lot more of it.
Here's somebody, I surfed the web and found this person who had another take on this. And again, when you start doing this, you've got to look at more than one person, more than one source.
Hi, today's video is about protein, especially the protein needs of athletes. I made a protein video a few months ago, but I wanted to make a better one. The other one was talking about the science behind it and how we only need about 5% of our calories coming from protein, and that all plant foods have all the essential amino acids and we don't need to combine plant foods. But sometimes that still doesn't convince people because it's so ingrained in our society that we need a lot of protein either for bodybuilding or for good athletic performance.
So bottom line, Mayo Clinic again recommends 50 to 80 grams a day. That's only 0.1 to 0.2 pounds a day, or 10 to 20% of a 2,000 calorie diet. How does this jive with a 1 pound T-bone? It doesn't. Keeping in mind, you don't need much. What are the options? Here are protein sources: red meat, chicken and fish, vegetables, avocado, lentils, pintos and other beans, nuts, peanuts, cashews, pistachios, spinach, kale, milk, non-dairy milk, grains, oatmeal, all breads, lots of different places you can get protein. So let's have a show of hands. How many people, when it comes to this kind of thing, say, raise your hands, I'll eat anything? That's a good chunk, probably about 30%. How many say, I'll stay away from red meat? Less than I'll eat anything. How many say, I won't eat any meat, but I'll eat dairy products, vegetarian? 1? Okay. How about, I'll eat nothing from an animal, only plant-based food? You and me are the only guys in town. Okay. A plant-based diet is not for everyone. Persuasive information suggests that in the largest study ever done that it is an extremely beneficial counter to serious disease. It requires a commitment and requires action, but so does an exercise program. It also demands a flexible attitude. Like in my case, if I have to go to somebody's house and they have a steak, okay, fine. I try to limit myself to 5%. So these are the kind of things you have to do. I was going to show you this film on how forceful the results of an extensive study of tens of thousands of people in China showing the difference in health and mortality rates between plant-based diet and non-plant-based diets was. But I don't have time for that, and I can point you in the right direction if you're interested. But cautionary note. It's difficult to know where to begin to refute the maze of misinformation, false promises commonly made by authors completely untrained in nutrition who are giving out advice. The Atkins diet is an example. Low carb, high fat, high protein diet. It works in the short term by restricting carbohydrates. Basically, it starves you, and it's unsustainable in the long term, and while this is happening, it can be dangerous as well. This is going on all the time. In conclusion, what is a body to do? Do your research. Make your choices. It's hard. You must do it if you want results. I can't emphasize that enough. Remember, believe no one person. There is no certainty. The only authority is you. But at least do your homework.